Awesome.
This meeting is being recorded.
Great. Thank you, JB, for that introduction. So yes, today I'm presenting on server-side JavaScript 101, really to orientate you to the language and explain its capabilities and the different types of functions available in the language. Firstly, just a little bit about me. For the benefit of you who don't know me, my name is Elliot Harper, and I'm a Senior Marketing Technology Architect at CloudKettle. We're based in Halifax, Canada, although I'm actually based in a place called Orange in Australia, which is right in the middle of the country. And today I'm presenting on this topic. Now, I think, so just a few words about me. I've been working with Marketing Cloud for many years. I've been awarded Salesforce MVP for the past 6 consecutive years, which is which I'm very grateful for, kind of my acknowledgement for my contribution to the community. I'm very active in the community and have been running the Marketing Cloud Developer User Group, or co-organizing it at least since 2015, so the past 7 years. Now, I just want to start by explaining I won't be teaching you server-side JavaScript today. I'll be orientating you to the language. I simply can't teach everything there is to know about server-side JavaScript. And this is really a language that is purely intended for a technical audience. However, I will be providing some pointers in how to get started in being proficient in the language. And to help the session flow, I think I'll just be accepting questions at the end, and we'll have plenty of time for questions. So let's get into it. Firstly, what exactly is this Ssjs thing, and why would you want to use it? Well, Ssjs, or server-side JavaScript, is a scripting language for Salesforce Marketing Cloud. And while AmpScript is a proprietary scripting language that enables sophisticated content personalization across channels, Ssjs is based on JavaScript, which is the world's most widely used programming language. And Ssjs enables you to extend the capabilities of Marketing Cloud through an extensive set of functions. Now, there are many use cases for Ssjs, which primarily focusing on a few different use cases. So firstly, marketing automation, which through the ability to include what are called script activities in an automation with an automation studio. We have API integration, that is integrating to both external APIs and Marketing Cloud APIs. And finally, web development in Cloud Pages through an extensive set of functions for doing things like getting and setting cookies, for passing form data, for retrieving HTTP headers, and much more. And look, while JavaScript can seem intimidating when you're getting started, it's actually really very easy to learn if you just take time to understand the syntax and the language fundamentals. So let's talk about the language then. So Ssjs is based on something called ECMAScript. Now, ECMAScript is the scripting language that forms the basis of JavaScript and is standardized by the body ECMA International. So the intent of the standard is to ensure interoperability of web pages across different web browsers. And while ECMAScript is commonly used for client-side scripting on the internet, it's increasingly being used for writing server-side applications and also services using technologies like Node.js. And Ssjs in Marketing Cloud is just another example of that server-side implementation. Now, it's also important to note that Ssjs in Marketing Cloud is based on edition 3, that is ECMAScript 3 we see here. And this was released way back in 1999. Fast forward to today, and I think ECMAScript is now in its 12th edition. So while you can't take full advantage of all the latest and greatest JavaScript features which appear in later editions, things like asynchronous programming and various functions for manipulating objects, ECMAScript 3 does provide elementary support for really the vast majority of platform use cases. And I think it's important to say, additionally, and in fairness, ECMAScript 3 is a lot easier to learn than programming concepts that are introduced in later JavaScript versions. So if you don't know JavaScript, actually Ssjs is a wonderful starting point. And it's actually quite a big jump between core foundational JavaScript, which you see in Ssjs and later versions. Now, Ssjs features can be broadly categorized into a few different areas that we'll be discussing today. So firstly, we have things called core functions, and then we have platform functions. Next, we have API functions, which provide a set of functions to access the Marketing Cloud SOAP API. And if any of you have used the API functions in AMScript, these are actually identical. In fact, I believe that Ssjs really uses just a wrapper for AMScript under the hood. And finally, we have the WS proxy object, or not finally, we have WS proxy, which is a utility object, which provides an alternative to API functions, which I'll be talking about. And also, really for sake of completeness, I'll just touch on there's something called script utility objects. Today's session, we're not going to cover API functions, as these are now effectively replaced by WS proxy. And script utility objects, while these provide really advanced support for external HTTP integrations, there are kind of limited use cases for them. And I mean, in fairness, I think from memory, I've used them like twice in the past 9 years. And there's really good documentation and code examples in the community if you want to learn more about script utility objects. But they're really, again, it's kind of a more advanced use cases for retry handling and more of HTTP requests. So that's a little bit about Ssjs. So, well, what about AMScript? And do we really need another scripting language in Marketing Cloud? Well, let's just discuss the differences between the two languages. So firstly, like Ssjs, AMScript is a server-side scripting language that's interpreted by a specific runtime environment, that is Salesforce Marketing Cloud. And it's also, like Ssjs, is proprietary to Marketing Cloud. You won't find AMScript available in any other platform. It's by design, it's really enabled sophisticated personalization across channels, email, mobile, and web content. And it's very easy to use, without any scripting knowledge, that you can quickly get started and quickly become proficient in your use of the language. I often joke that AMScript is really designed for or architected for a different era, in that it doesn't support JSON. So JSON is or JavaScript object notation, is this data exchange format, which provides kind of a human readable way of describing structured data. So yes, I mean, it's got no way of parsing JSON data. Also, while we can use AMScript to go and make GET requests to go and retrieve content from an external HTTP link through the HTTP GET function, and also make POST requests. And there's someone not on mute. Anyway, if you could just go on mute. Make POST requests. This is still somewhat limited, so we can't go and set headers, which are often required for API calls, where we need to, for example, go and set the authorization header in a request. Additionally, with AMScript, you can't go and create your own functions. AMScript is what's referred to as a pure language, in that it has a set of prescribed functions, of which there are now more recently 150 functions now in AMScript, with the Spring 22 release, or the addition of 2 new AMScript functions. But yeah, you can't go and build your own. You're just restricted into the out-of-the-box functions that are available. So on the other hand, server-side JavaScript is also a server-side scripting language, but it's based on JavaScript, which I think I mentioned before is the world's most widely used scripting language, and is really, I'd say, the lingua franca of any programmer. I mean, you have to really know kind of JavaScript. It enables you to interact with platform features, so we can do things like we like creating data extensions, for example, and what else can we do? We can, I guess, start automations and much more. And do things like send emails or through a kind of triggered send. And I'd say its main use cases for using for use in automations to go and use programmable content to go and create some very sophisticated automations where we're maybe creating data extensions on the fly, or maybe updating queries within an automation. It has an extensive set of functions, more extensive than AMScript. So Ssjs currently has 332 functions in comparison to AMScript, which, as I said, is 150, so less than half. And it's much stronger support for external HTTP integrations, and also for parsing HTTP requests, and doing things like maybe getting and setting cookies and request headers and much more. And because it's based on JavaScript, you can actually build your own functions. So it's a lot more flexible than AMScript. So let's now go and take a look at the required server-side JavaScript syntax. So server-side JavaScript code is contained within HTML script tags that you probably see in a kind of a client side of it. You've ever looked at the source of an HTML page. And but the difference here is it has an additional run at server attribute. So this is the attribute in its simplest form. You can use quotation marks for the attribute value, or you don't have to. It's a really personal choice. But this attribute is important as it provides an instruction to the platform to execute the server-side code within it. So yes, if you see this annotation, say in Cloud Pages or in Automation Studio, this is what it's referring to. And yeah, this is another example here. And again, maybe JB, you can just have a look at someone. I think it's Bread, is not on mute. That'd be kind of helpful if you can mute people who aren't on mute. So it can optionally be enclosed in quotation marks. So let's now take a look at Ssjs functions. So in AMScript, we have an entire function library, but in Ssjs, we have different areas which we're discussing next. So specifically core functions, which are designed to support common scripting use cases. Then we have what are called platform functions, which are separate from the core library and actually more closely aligned with AMScript. Then we have API functions for accessing the Marketing Cloud SOAP API. And finally, WS Proxy, which really I highly commend as an alternative to API function. And again, whoever's on mute, if you could go on mute, or JB, if you can mute them.
Yeah, I'm trying to unmute, but I see it's already in mute. I'll talk to them. Sorry about that.
Okay, no, that's okay. I think, I see quite a few people on the call. Thanks. So let's start by discussing core functions. So core functions in server-side JavaScript are orientated around using the SOAP API to perform common use cases. They're extremely lightweight, which means that we can achieve a result often with just a few lines of code. And this really makes them ideal for rapid development. However, one consideration is they're not as performant as platform functions or WS proxy, as they incur an overhead as behind the scenes, the interpreter has to translate between the different runtime environments. But they're still really well suited where speed may not be a factor, like in script activities, where it really doesn't matter if it takes an extra second for something to happen. But if you're trying to perform an operational task on a cloud page, it can be a bit of a frustrating user experience to have a latency. And I should kind of Ssjs core, so you can go and just have a look on the Marketing Cloud official documentation here for, let's go and have a look at core functions here. So these are all the core functions here, like email functions. We can go and let's go and have a look at send functions, cancel send, tracking. I just want to actually show you, maybe we'll just pick a good use case. Go to data extensions, for example, add. And here we go. So using this code here, you were able just to create a data extension on the fly with a defined customer key with a name and fields, 3 in this case, name field 1, 2, and 3, and define their type and other attributes related to that field. So it's just really convenient, in just a quick few lines of code. So if you want to use either core functions or platform functions, you'll need to lean on this documentation. You can't go and use any scripting functions without documentation. So that's where to go and look. Additionally, while the functions are essentially a wrapper for the SOAP API, they can't access all the API object properties. They're only kind of predefined ones. So they're kind of, I guess, for pre-canned use cases. So, for example, let's go and take a look at this one here for creating a data extension. So we can create a data extension, but we can't do things like, I can't apply a data retention policy against it. I can make it a sendable data extension, but we can't perform kind of other tasks. For that, you'd have to use something like WS proxy. Now, in order to use the core functions, we firstly need to initialize the core function library. And we can do this by using the following syntax. So if you ever see this in some server-side JavaScript code, this is exactly what it's doing. So if you're using core functions, you will have to go and load the core libraries. And there are actually several different library versions. However, there I think 1.1.1, 1.1.5 from memory, but one will load the latest version library. So there's really no need to specify others. I mean, you see some people put version 1.1.5, but yeah, it's kind of redundant. You can just write 1. Next, let's talk about platform functions. So platform functions provide a library which is comparable to AMScript, but it's JavaScript based. And unlike the core library, you do not need to load the platform library, as it's included by default. And in fairness, the syntax is a bit misleading. So you see platform load, and you think, oh, maybe I'm loading platform functions, but no, you're using a platform function to load the core library. So there's really no need to include it. It kind of, if anything, would add a small overhead. Platform functions exist outside of the core library and actually are generally more performant. And they can be used across messages and landing pages and also in script activities in automation. And you can identify a platform function by its syntax, which appears in dot notation, which follows kind of basically a JavaScript object notation. So the first is the object name, in this case, this platform. Next, we have the property. So the property is either, you'll see application, request, response, variable, recipient, or function. And finally, the method or function name. So here's an example of a platform function that uses the now method to return the current system date and time. So again, this is, if any of you have worked with AmpScript, it's really similar in that we have a function name, in this case is now, and obviously in AmpScript it's identical. Optionally, we can pass arguments to the function through parameters, which are enclosed in these parentheses. And if any of you here don't have any clue or idea what I'm talking about, maybe you know Excel or have worked with Excel. And Excel also uses functions, for concat and add and or sum and index and many more. And they're pure functions too. They accept an input through arguments, which you pass as a comma-separated string in parentheses and return an output. It's really no different. Anyway, this is how you kind of identify it. So you might see platform response.write, for example, or any of these permutations we see of this property. So now let me go on to explain WS proxy. So this is, I used to say it's relatively new, but it's actually added 4 years ago to server-side JavaScript. And as its name implies, it acts as a proxy layer between the Marketing Cloud SOAP web service, that is WS, and server-side JavaScript. And the object is available in all non-send contexts. And it has the same restrictions in place as other SOAP API access methods. So what that means is that you can't use it in an email to send an email. By design, it's really designed to address the limitations of the Ssjs core library functions, which are very prescriptive and limited, and also the programming paradigm of platform API functions, as it enables a highly declarative programming approach, which what I mean by that is the object simply instructs on what needs to be done rather than explaining how to do it. And this is really a welcome departure from API functions, which follow this highly procedural approach. If any of you worked with API functions in either AmpScript or server-side JavaScript, I think you'll relate to that. I mean, it takes many lines of code to achieve a result. What else? So, oh yes, and ironically, WS proxy uses JSON or JavaScript object notation to express object properties instead of XML. XML is the markup language used by the SOAP API. So although it's actually using the SOAP API under the hood, it's taking the JSON data, and JSON is can be natively passed by JavaScript, and then it translates it, I guess, to XML behind the scenes. So they're really the 4 different libraries. So I thought maybe since we've got some time now, I'll show you an example of server-side JavaScript in action. I think we'll go from 0 to hero, and I'm just going to go and stop sharing and share a different screen. So let me do that. I'll stop share here and share this screen here. And here we are, just in Email Studio. Now, what I want to do here is, perhaps we're going and sending an email. This is maybe as part of a journey, and it's I probably wouldn't recommend this for going and sending to millions of subscribers, although some people do. I mean, it will just be a very slow send. And we want to go and retrieve the weather and temperature for a specific city. And we're actually going to use an API called WeatherStack for this, so which gives us back a JSON response. And as I mentioned before, you can't really pass JSON data using AmpScript. I mean, you might be able to by using kind of indexes, but it's just extremely awkward and really not well suited, and particularly for more dealing with more complex data structures. So to start with, let's just say in a few lines. In fact, I want to go and use both, show you how you can use both server-side JavaScript and AMScript together in harmony. So I'm just going to start with, and let me zoom and write in, script run at a server. Sorry, it's a bit late here and tired at the end of the day. And I'm going to add the closing script tag. So firstly, we're using this API, which has an API key. So I encourage you to, you can go and sign up and get your own free one, but kind of like a cooking show, kind of here's one I created earlier. So I'm just going to go and paste that in there. So you'll notice that this syntax here, this is just JavaScript. And any of you who've worked with AMScript, you'd have noted that you have to, or you can, you don't have to, declare AMScript variables before setting them. You know, it's a loosely typed language, so in AMScript, so it's really not enforced, but it's regarded as best practice to always declare your variables with a var keyword, as when you do so, it adds an index to an internal dictionary. But anyway, so this is how we kind of declare and set variables in one go in JavaScript. And now we want to go and define the URL that we're going to be using to make the request. And we're going to use a, well, before I do that, let me go and type in city, var city, and the closest main city here is Sydney. So let me go and type that in here. And in this semicolon appending here, if you're unfamiliar with this syntax, this is actually quite optional, but it really signifies a line break, and it comes into play when you go and minify this. If I want to put it all in one single line, then it effectively acts as a new line break. It's always kind of recommended best practice to append each line with a semicolon character. So next we're going to go and put in our URL. So our URL is constructed, let me go and paste this in here, of two URL parameters. And so the first is access key, so that's the API key that we just defined up there. And then we've got another thing, I'll say and query is equal to city. So I need to go and obviously programmatically go and create this string to populate it with the respective variable. So I'm just going to go and type in, say, create a new variable, and we're going to call this one var URL. And I'll put this in quotation marks here. In JavaScript, you concatenate values together, be it strings and variables by using this this plus operator here, which is a couple of different functions, but it can be used to add numeric values together, or when used in the context of strings, it actually concatenates together or joins them together. So we're going to go and use API key plus, and then we've got another string here as part of our URL, and we're going to go and append that city variable that we defined earlier. Maybe this city is actually derived from the sendable data extension. We didn't have one in this case, or it could be looking up, based on some like using a lookup function similar to AMScript as a equivalent as a platform function. And so that's that. So let's actually go and print that out and show you what that looks like. And there are two ways of outputting a variable in server-side JavaScript. We can go and use write and then URL. And this is actually a core function. But as I mentioned before, in order to use core functions, we need to load the core library. there's also a corresponding platform function. So I think it's something like platform response. Right, so response is the actual function. Let's go and click next and preview a record. And hopefully we don't see what I've done wrong here. Oh, here we go. Yes, there it is. It's fantastic. So it's resolved, and you can see that we programmatically created this string here, which is quite fun. So now let's go and make a get request to go and get it. So I'm going to go create another variable, and we're going to call this bar weather, and I'm going to go and set this one to a HTTP GET request, which is actually identical to AMP-script. You use AMP-script. So again, this is a platform function, and then HTTP. Oh, sorry. Get and URL. So URL is obviously that variable I defined before. And let me just shuffle this around. So now I want to go and see the output of this. So I'm just going to go and write weather. Next. So you can see I get this. Oh gosh, I hate the road does that. I get this JSON data back. Let's go and see. This is all minified, so it's kind of hard to read. But if you go and have a look at a JSON beautifier in valid character, I'm not quite sure whether it is, but what is line 8? A waning crescent, it spans 2 lines for some example. I don't know where that is. Anyway, so you can see that this data here this is called JSON data, and it represents structured data in this very human readable format. And now we can go and use this to go and extract specific values from this response. But before we do that, the problem that we've got is this is now a string that's returned back, and we need to transform this to a native JavaScript object so we can interpret it. We simply can't go and read a string and extract what we want from it. And so to do that in server-side JavaScript, we use something called a function called parseJSON. So I'm going to go and create an object here, or a variable called object obj, and I'm going to say platform function dot parse JSON. And it's important to note that with JavaScript, it's case sensitive for your function's name. So while it's very relaxed for AMP-script, it could be title case or lowercase, whatever you want. This case is important for JavaScript. And we're going to go and take that response string we got, that's called weather. Great. And now we want to go and get a specific value. So maybe we want to go and output, let's go and have a look specifically. Maybe we want the current temperature. So let's say the current temperature is 20 there. So let's go back here, and we can do things like object, or obj in shorthand, current temperature. So if you kind of understand one thing today, it's important. While I'm not teaching you JavaScript, I will teach you one thing, and that's what a JavaScript object is. And the JavaScript object has 3 parts. So firstly, we have an object, and then the properties of the object, and then the actual method. So think of like a car, for example. So in a car, think of a car as an object, and a car has properties. So it could be like color is white, and the model is maybe a Volvo. and then a method is like start or stop. This is expressed in dot notation much the same way. So so we want to go and get the current temperature, and if we go back and have a look here, so we got the this current property here in the value temperature. So we describe it in this dot notation here. So hopefully if I go and click next here, it should say 20. 20 does, fantastic, okay. But now let's say that we want to go and use some values here in AMScript. So we want to kind of hand over those variable values, in this case the current temperature, to AMScript, and we can actually do that in server-side JavaScript. There are two server-side JavaScript functions for enabling interoperability between server-side JavaScript variables and AMScript variables, and these are through the provision of two functions called set value and get value. So in this case, we want to go and use set value to go and set a value as an AMScript variable. So I'm going to say it right simply platform.function. No, platform.variable. So I'm not mistake. Dot set value, and we're going to go and say the maybe temp. So temp, this is the AMScript variable we're going to be using. Optionally, and sometimes you see people actually go and use this @sign. It's really personal preference, it's not required, but we'll throw it in there. And I'm just going to go and use that, copy and paste that object current temperature here. For good measure, I'm just going to go and do another one called fields. And if we go back to here, we can see that there's this current temperature, and there's a feels like 20. So it might feel hotter or colder. In this case, it's the same, but feels like was the name of the key there. So now I can just simply go and put some AMScript. Sorry, in my message here, I can say the current temperature in city is temp, and maybe C, and it feels like temp C. So let's go and put some AMScript in here. So the city here, so I'm just going to go and actually, we've already gone and created this city variable up here, which again, we could be getting from a data extension. So let me go and put this in here and define that value there. You're probably aware with the AMScript syntax, we're going to be using inline AMScript in here, and the v function to output the value of a variable. I'll just continue this pattern here. Is temp, and it feels like, what's that feels? C on the end, and exclamation mark for emphasis. So there we see, yeah, the current temperature in Sydney is 20 degrees C, and it feels like 20 degrees C. So it probably doesn't mean much to you, for those of you calling in from Phoenix, Arizona. But of course, it's all Fahrenheit in the US. Yeah, that's kind of a simple example of, in just a kind of few lines of code that we've used server-side JavaScript to go and retrieve a current where the base must describe its location, and also pass it over to JavaScript, sorry, to AMScript. So I'm going to stop sharing. That kind of concludes my presentation. We've got tons of time for questions, and I'm happy to dive into other examples, or if you have any questions like, can you do this in server-side JavaScript, or can you show me how to go and do this? I'll be more than happy to go and cover that. There was a question here, where does the API key come from? You know, it's a great question. Again, I was just using this free API called WeatherStack, which I'll put a link in the chat window. I just picked one at random. Today there's an API for everything, isn't there? our API stack is now API layer. So, but yeah, it's just it was a free free API that I kind of got off the internet, but you can Google it. So there's a whole kind of marketplace out here. So does anyone else, please, yeah, thanks, JB. Yeah, so recently you came across external Ssjs library email 360. Yeah, so this is a really great question. So this is a library which is a very innovative library from Sasha Huold. And it provides a very convenient way of, I guess, using server-side JavaScript. To think of it like, I describe this email 360, the Ssjs library, as jQuery for server-side JavaScript. So it kind of simplifies the amount of code that you need to write to perform specific functions. And more specifically, as well, is it also acts as a wrapper for AMP script. So there are, well, you know, as I said before, server-side JavaScript is a more extensive scripting language than AMP script. There are certain functions that simply aren't available in server-side JavaScript, for like hashing and counting the number of rows in a data extension, and interacting with Salesforce is a big thing for retrieving records or creating or updating them. Sasha's gone to kind of great lengths and created this very easy to use library for, I guess, further extending the capabilities of Ssjs and simplifying it. So I've used it occasionally. I've kind of, I take a lot of cues from what Sasha's done here, and follow, you know, kind of similar design patterns in my code. But yeah, do go and check it out. There's a great link there, and it's really well documented.
Thanks, Elliot. And you have covered the Ssjs configuration, and you made it look so easy that any beginner who wants to learn Ssjs can get started and creating their own code. And I do see
that is true, and it's not true. So you know, the danger with that. So let me explain. Look, I learned, I confess, I learned server-side JavaScript very reluctantly. I left it for as long as possible. I actually felt quite intimidated by JavaScript as a language. I didn't originally come from a programming background. While AMP is really designed for as a language for non-developers. I mean, if you stare at it for long enough, it's very verbose, and you can figure out what the code does. It's very human readable. Server-side JavaScript, you can stare at it, you know, all month long, and you will still never figure out what it does until you take the time to learn it. You know, it's got some very specific syntax. We use curly braces and, you know, 2 pipe characters for an or, and you know, it really does look kind of completely foreign. You really need to take the time to learn JavaScript. And I just want to stress this: don't think away that you can just run away and say, "Oh, Elliot showed me server-side JavaScript, so I can go and use it now." You need to know JavaScript fundamentals. I guess the good news is that it is actually a really easy language to learn. I learned it in the afternoon, and I mean, particularly if you've got AMP script knowledge, I'd say that the gap is quite small. There are, of course, you know, hundreds, if not thousands, of tutorials and resources for learning JavaScript. I find W3 Schools kind of a great starting point to walk you through the fundamentals. And
I think we are losing you, Elliot. Your voice is breaking.
You hear me now, JB? No?
Yeah, it seems to be good now.
Okay, good. Yeah. So what was I saying? I guess I'm not quite sure what you hear or didn't hear, but I just want to stress that it is important to take the time to learn JavaScript before you attempt to use server-side JavaScript. As without it, it's just going to be a really frustrating experience. But you can learn JavaScript very quickly. Again, I learned it in half a day. Just go to W3 Schools. I'll put the link here, and this tutorials. Learn JavaScript. I'm just going to put this link here.
That's a very important point,
by...
Elliot. Thanks for bringing it up. And thanks for the link as well.
No worries, that's all right. There was a question about query. What does this mean? How it's fetching data? So again, I'm just going and using the kind of prescribed API. This isn't a JavaScript per se. But let me go and put this to answer your question. I'm just going to reconstruct this. Is insert key and query is city. Is Sydney. So to answer your question here, I'm making an API call and I'm passing across values to that GET request of the API call as URL parameters, and URL parameters are identified by, you've got this question mark to delimit kind of after your URL, and you've got the parameter name, which in this case I've got to access key and query, and then the values there. So you'll see this pattern probably in most or all websites that you visit. It's kind of very common for passing across values. Okay, awesome, thanks. Do I have any public accessible repository with some widely used server-side JavaScript codes? Oh no, but I don't. But this is a good kind of a segue. I did mean to show you this slide here. So I don't personally. I just haven't got around to it actually. I think I've got some few things on Stack Exchange, but I do not Stack Exchange and also on GitHub. But I do want to point you to these additional resources, and I probably need to append email 360 on here. That's an oversight, I apologize. So we've got AnaScript.xyz or XYZ for our US audience tonight or today. And this is a blog by Ivan Mazin. He's written some really great content in server-side JavaScript. Go and check it out. It's not just AmScript, it's both AmScript and server-side JavaScript. Then you've got Zuzeni Yarchents's blog, which is sfmarketing.cloud. How to SFMC, that's a kind of good community resource. Adam Spig's blog is signaturemoves.com. So I co-authored the AmScript guide with him. He's a fellow Salesforce MVP. My blog, my vlog, should I say, mc.chat. And in fact, I've got a great video coming out this week. I just shot it a few days using AmScript and JavaScript, so go check that out. And Greg Gifford's blog is called tonington.com. And Greg is actually has got a number of really great posts on getting started with Ssjs and introduces you to the fundamentals. So I think from memory is like part 1 and part 2, and maybe there are other parts too. But go and check out his blog and search specifically for one's tagged Ssjs, some rich resources in there.
Thanks, Elliot. I do see one other question. Can we use AmScript in a script activity that also includes Ssjs?
The answer is yes and no. So technically, no, you can't. And you can't just go in and include AmScript code verbatim and put in a script activity. But there is a technique which appears through the Ssjs live on email 360, and it's a kind of a very popular technique that others use. So I guess there are two methods. I mean, you can actually have AmScript code within a block, specifically a code snippet, and then go and reference that code snippet and use treat as content to force that code to be executed. or if you have specific kind of AMP script functions that you want to execute, then you can wrap them in server-side JavaScript. Let me kind of show you one example, if I may, and I'm pretty sure I've got, you kind of caught me unawares. I've got some, so I've got anything to hand, but it's a technique that I use fairly frequently. So let me just, give me a second, because I'm just very keen to show you some of this stuff. What's this one? I'm just trying to find some create query. Now, I've just been writing it all today, but it's sitting on a different computer. So let me go find file.
No issues, Elliot. Take your time.
Yeah, Ampere. No, here's one. Okay, so this is one more kind of complex example. I was just looking for more simple example to start off with, but where I'm actually going creating a record in Salesforce. And I'm going to go and put this in the chat window. No, in fact, I'll go and I'll show you it here. I'm going to share my screen and share this handler.js share to see. So I've created a function to go and create a record in Salesforce. You can't do this in server-side JavaScript, but you can in AMP script. What I'm actually doing is using the same syntax pattern to programmatically create a string, which is ultimately interpreted as AMP script. So what it does is I go and define an object name, it's like contact or lead, and then I have an array of, what do I have? In this array, it contains name and value pairs, objects containing name and value pairs of corresponding fields in that object and the values I want to go and update. And then I go and use this treat as content platform function to force the interpreter or rendering engine to go and evaluate the AMP script code. But I need to go and obfuscate it in by breaking this inline AMP script apart. And that's to, I guess, trick the interpreter or assure the interpreter that actually this is intentional. I'm not going and using AMP script code in server-side JavaScript, although technically I am, but because you can't mix the two languages together. These are very separate languages, and this pattern is really convenient for a couple of different methods. So firstly, for server-side JavaScript, because you can't use AMP script in server-side JavaScript, this is a way around it. But secondly, also I use this pattern when even in Cloud Pages. So and using that technique I showed you before, you can exchange variable values across both languages. It's quite awkward if you want to go and perform a single task or operation in two different languages. You have one piece of code, a code block in AMP script, and a code block in server-side JavaScript. It's really not ideal. So I typically create these kind of say polyfill or kind of reusable functions that perform the same operation as in AMP script, but within server-side JavaScript. So yeah, that's one way to do it. And yeah, for more information, go and check out the Ssjs lib. And there are some different examples on Stack Exchange too. Sega asked, would this method work, for instance, to look up AMP script to a data extension, then use that data as a variable in Ssjs? I mean, it would, but you wouldn't. Yeah, I wouldn't recommend that. There are a couple. You can either use platform functions or core functions to do exactly the same thing. I'd say it's just has a slight overhead in translating between the different languages and in the runtime environment. So there's a a platform function lookup, which is actually identical to AMScript. And I think behind the scenes that it uses AMScript. So if you just want to go and look up a value, then you can just, I'll just go and point you to this one here. I'll just go back, share my screen again. And again, you just using a lot of JavaScript is about nowhere to look. So here we go. So we're going to have a look at platform function, which is its own category nested in here. And we can see that we've got data extension functions, which we can also do the same with core functions. I mean, there's a lot of kind of crossover. Not guide template language, that's a different day. Server-side JavaScript, platform functions. Where's it gone? Platform functions. There we go. Why isn't that better? I don't know. And then data extension functions, and then lookup. So again, accepts at a minimum 4 arguments. It's exactly the same as AMScript. That's the name of the data extension, name of the column to which you retrieve a value, and then your where clause, as you can see here. So it's exactly the same syntax, or at least the parameter pattern is. Any other questions come through?
I see one more.
What's the problem? Yeah, there is.
What is the probability?
Yeah, what's the problem?
Go ahead, Elliot.
Yeah, what's the probability of chance that SFMC gets converted to full-length code or development technology? I'm not really following the question fully. I think full-length code. Yeah, so look. I mean, servers. I'm not getting what that's hinting at. I think it's important to point out that Marketing Cloud and its accompanying scripting languages is really designed for technical marketers. These aren't hardcore developers, and it's I often joke that the majority of Marketing Cloud developers that I work with, and I for one am one of them, where I say we're kind of a developers by accident. And I know that I don't have a degree in computer science, and we kind of stumble into this, and so it's really this proprietary language which is designed really for non-developers to quickly get you started. So I don't see it coming into fully get converted into anything else. I think, well, certainly both AMScript and Ssjs are here to stay. I don't have much hope in any revolutionary changes, much as I'd like to see support for much later versions of JavaScript, and there doesn't seem to be a kind of business case to spend effort in developing these quite established libraries any further. I mean, they're they are very mature, and I say have barely been touched in years. But in fairness, I'd say that's kind of and that attributes to how well they were written in the first place. So maybe we will. I can't really see them. I don't really anticipate much evolution of either Ssjs or AMScript, but who knows what will happen. So I think the probability is very slight to answer that question.
I think we are at time, Elliot, and also I don't see any other questions. Thank you very much.
Well, if you do have questions, I'll just go. You can head over to. I'll just quickly just go. Shameless plug for my blog, or vlog, should I say, mc.chat. You can head over here, and down the bottom, there's a bit of a loads. There you go. Some videos will load in a second, but right down the bottom is you can go and schedule a call. So you can, any questions about server-side JavaScript and what I covered today, or actually any Marketing Cloud questions in general that you can't find or get answers for in Stack Exchange or any other forums, go and head over there. And yeah, I'll be delighted to have a chat with you.
It's so nice of you, Elliot.
That's all right.
Thank you.
Okay.
And
Thanks,
with that,
everyone.
yeah, we can wrap up this session. And thank you once again, Elliot. You're always there for any kind of help, and you're ready to share your knowledge. This is really helpful to all of us. Thank you. And thanks everyone for joining. We hope to catch you in the next session. Take care. Bye.
Thanks, bye.